Good evening, everyone. I wanted to get around to making this brief video discussing my personal ranking of all the Star Wars films. Again, this personal list of mine is subjective. All of us as Star Wars fans, we're going to have varying opinions. There's going to be certain Star Wars films that personally mean more to some of us more than others, but that's okay. I'm personally the type of fan that tends to love them all in their own way, but I do have certain ones ranked higher based on quality in terms of story too. Um, I'm not gonna rank personally something like Attack of the Clones or Phantom Menace as high as I would The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, or Rogue One. So, and that's no knock on any of them, but it's just we personally are moved by certain episodes more than others and certain standalone films more than others. So, to get this ranking going, I would say to start off with, I'm going to go from the bottom, so worst to best. So I'm going to start off with at the bottom, I would rank the Clone Wars. And while I am a big fan of the Clone Wars animated series, I feel like the movie missed the quality that made the animated series so great. And it just didn't really hit the mark for me on a personal level. And that's okay. It didn't really achieve what this series had achieved, and I think things moved too quick, and the extra storyline, the extra execution just wasn't there the way it needed to be. So at my bottom, worst, I would put the Clone Wars. Right above that, I would probably say, and these films do mean a lot to me because they are what got me into Star Wars originally back in 99 and 2002, which were The Phantom Menace Episode 1 and Episode 2 Attack of the Clones in 2002. I originally got into Star Wars when I was finishing 5th grade, so that was when The Phantom Menace was released, May of that year in 1999. And at the time, it was the greatest thing to me. It felt like the second coming or something along those lines, where it was the greatest thing I had ever seen, I thought, for myself at the time, being an 11-year-old kid. But as you get older, you really do recognize its flaws more and more, as well as 3 years later with Attack of the Clones. But I would probably put Attack of the Clones slightly under Phantom Menace, even though I feel like they're both about neck and neck for me. But there's things I enjoy watching Attack of the Clones more, but I feel like the bad writing, the storyline is there, but the execution could have been better. The CGI is a little bit too overly done at times. I would say the dialogue and direction from George Lucas was a little bit stiff and wooden, especially the romantic scenes between Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman as Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala. But that being said, they are very enjoyable. They're very action-packed. The storylines go there, but I just think the execution could have been much better in terms of how these movies were delivered, and they lack that extra spark for me that I've come to really love as I've gotten older and older about the original trilogy. But we'll get to that in a second. But for me, right after Clone Wars, I would say Attack of the Clones, then The Phantom Menace. I ranked The Phantom Menace just slightly higher, especially due to rewatching it. That entire sequence of the pod race for me does hold up pretty well, as does the appearance of Darth Maul, played by Ray Park. And I feel like both his brief duel with Qui-Gon on Tatooine, as well as the final duel between himself, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon, is just incredible. And one can argue, with the exception of the Anakin versus Obi-Wan duel in Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, that might be the best lightsaber duel of the prequels, and certainly one of the best lightsaber duels of the entire saga period. But it's definitely the highlight of Episode 1, and just for certain specific reasons like that, and I do feel that the story sort of is kind of like a precursor of what would be the come of the next generation in A New Hope Episode 4. And it's just it's a very enjoyable film despite its flaws. It suffers from a lot of the same things that Episode 2 would suffer, which was bad dialogue, wooden characterizations, stiff direction, but it does use a lot of practical effects in certain places, and there are more real sets than what I remember growing up, where it relied heavily on CGI too, but I feel like that movie still used a few more practical effects than what we would get in Attack of the Clones. They both feature great action, storyline is good, but I just think they're bogged down by just wooden characterizations by the actors, and the dialogue just doesn't really fully go there. They do kind of drag at times too in certain parts, so I highly enjoy them. I still rewatch them all the time, but I would rank them a lot lower on my list though. Just over the years, having rewatched these films again recently. Above Episode 1 and 2, I would probably put, and this is going to be very unpopular, but I personally would put The Last Jedi right above them. And most fans would probably put Last Jedi in their top 3, top 5. But for me, while I do love a lot of things that Rian Johnson did do with Episode 8, The Last Jedi, it lacks the spirit and adventure that you want in a Star Wars film. There's a lot of that movie that really doesn't feel like Star Wars to me. And me personally, I'm in the minority here where I feel like a lot of fans don't always agree with this, but I've never really been a big fan with what they did with Luke, outside of his scenes on Ahch-To, of course, but I think just the idea of him projecting himself going up against his nephew Kylo Ren, I feel like that could have been executed so much better, where had he actually left the planet, maybe after having this conversation with Spirit Yoda, and actually returned to the fight and fought his nephew to the death, and whether that would have ended with Luke Skywalker passing away or not, or defeating Kylo Ren. I just think there's so many different directions they could have taken The Last Jedi in, and it would have been so much more effective had Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker actually been there, and that would have added even more depth to his reunion with Carrie Fisher as well. But specifically for the last 20 plus minutes or so of that movie, this movie gets ranked very low for me for that reason, because 6 years later almost, I still can't shake how that film ended, and I will always stand by the reasoning that Luke Skywalker should have been there to fight his nephew to the death. And it doesn't move me the way that it should. And I'm not saying it's a terrible movie. I think it's a very well acted movie, especially by the three leads of Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, and Mark Hamill. But I think everybody in general in the supporting cast is sort of like a dumbed down version of their character too, including John Boyega, who I'm a very big fan of. I don't feel that he gave as good a performance as Finn as what he did in Force Awakens, and I just feel, period, that his character just was underused, period, in these films. I feel that Oscar Isaac was given maybe a little more to do, of course, but I feel that even his dialogue and performance was still overall better in Force Awakens for me. But I'm in the minority because there are a lot of fans that do prefer Last Jedi over The Force Awakens and who would rank The Last Jedi in their top three to top five. I personally am just not one of those fans. I enjoy it. I can watch it still, being a fan of all Star Wars films, but it's not one of my personal favorites. Don't hate it, but there's a lot of things I really dislike about this film. So for those reasons alone, I would rank it where I have it, slightly above episodes 1 and 2, but it's, for me personally, it's underneath everything else. So right above that, I would say I would probably put Solo above it, even though Solo kind of lacks that extra oomph that you want. But Solo is just a lot of fun. It kind of feels very unique. It feels like something different that we haven't seen in the Star Wars saga. And although there was a lot of complaints about the actor that was used to play a young Han Solo not resembling Harrison Ford, there's a lot of truth to that, but I do feel that he did bring little nuances that do kind of foreshadow the Harrison Ford that we would know from the original trilogy and how he played Han Solo. So I felt that the actor did do a good job. I felt Donald Glover did a great job as a young Lando Calrissian, but realistically, I mean, it would have been extremely difficult to find actors that could have played a young Han Solo or a young Lando Calrissian as good as Harrison Ford or Billy D. Williams. But that being said, it's still very enjoyable. It's very fun. It feels kind of like the original trilogy, but it feels like something new. The tone is different. It's more of a heist movie in a lot of ways too, and a very interesting standalone solo outing for Star Wars. So I would put Solo a little bit ahead of Last Jedi for me personally, and then right above Solo, I would probably say, it's tough. I would probably say I'd put The Force Awakens, even though Force Awakens is very rewatchable for me personally, where it brings back the magic and wonder of the original trilogy for me personally in a huge way. But I do agree, years later rewatching it, it does feel very much like a soft reboot of A New Hope. There's so many story beats of a droid having a hidden map that, obviously the First Order in this new saga is after, which is basically a knockoff of the Empire. Kylo Ren is basically ripping off his grandfather, which was Darth Vader, and a lot of the story beats are similar. Jakku is basically Tatooine, but that being said, it was very feel good. It feels, watching it every time, it feels kind of like the start of a brilliant trilogy to come that obviously would never 100% be fulfilled. So it's tough. And you know what? I just realized actually that I forgot a significant film on this list that personally I'm going to put right under The Last Jedi, but ahead of Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones, and Phantom Menace, before I put Last Jedi, which is The Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker is much more enjoyable for me. I enjoy it. Feels like a warm blanket in a way, but it's fine as a Star Wars adventure, but as a conclusion of a trilogy of trilogies, it's extremely weak. They played it way too safe. I feel like we should have visually seen the spirits help Rey defeat Palpatine, but then the whole point of Palpatine being back, period, feels kind of pointless, and it kind of takes away from the depth of Return of the Jedi, takes away from Vader's sacrifice in Return of the Jedi. So there's a lot of things I really don't like about it. I enjoy it just fine. It's very fun. It's great as a Star Wars movie, but it's a terrible conclusion to conclude all 9 movies. And I do feel that it was a mistake to wait to the very, very last saga episode to finally bring back Billy D. Williams as Lando, who personally I probably would have brought back in Last Jedi, where he easily could have been the code breaker that was played by Benicio del Toro. It would have made a little more sense, and he deserved to have been in at least two of these sequel trilogy films. But again, what's done is done. We can't really go back. But that's just a personal observation. But going back on the list, and I apologize for neglecting this, but I would say Clone Wars at the bottom, then Attack of the Clones, The Phantom Menace, The Rise of Skywalker, The Last Jedi, Solo, and then above Solo I would put The Force Awakens, and above The Force Awakens I would say Revenge of the Sith. And Revenge of the Sith is a film that has always exhausted me emotionally due to the dark subject matter. I feel that the storyline went there, the execution could have been much better, and how Lucas decided to tell the story of Anakin becoming Vader. But it's still an extremely fun film, and I think back in '05 when it was out, at the time I probably would have put it as arguably my second favorite Star Wars film, right behind my favorite, which I'll get to in a moment. But I would put Revenge of the Sith pretty high up there because of the significance of that story, because it is an important story to the saga, and it does bridge the gap from the prequel trilogy to the original trilogy, bridging that 20-year span between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. So it is very important. There's a lot of stuff I love that Sith does, especially in the last 40 minutes. I think it's brilliant, a lot of it. But again, it suffers from a lot of the same issues that episodes 1 and 2 did too, with bad dialogue, stiff wooden characterization, stiff direction, overindulgence, and overuse of CGI. But it's still a lot of fun, and I feel that this one actually feels a little bit closer to the original trilogy quality, and how they're able to add a lot more fan service, a lot more comfort of the familiar, where it feels that it's leading up to the Star Wars we all know and love. It's not perfect, but it is rewatchable. It is the ultimate fan movie, as I refer to it, because it does everything we would want as fans, but execution wise, I feel it could have been much better, but it's still very well done. And given for what it is, I still immensely enjoy it. But it has fallen in rank for me personally over the years, as more and more Star Wars films have come out, as I've been able to rewatch certain films again. But I will leave it where it is at personally right now, which would be number 5 on my list. But coming in, I would say 4th place, I would have to say Rogue One, because I do feel Rogue One is a much better made movie. It's a much better movie overall. I don't, personally, watching it over and over, I don't always care enough about the characters personally, but I would have to say that the TV series Andor really helped with that more, where his character, as well as Felicity Jones' character as well, definitely mean more now. You understand more of what Andor went through, and then just rewatching it, the brilliance of what Gareth Edwards was able to do, and really making you believe that these characters are breathing the same air and the same time span, same universe that Luke Skywalker, Han, and Leia are on other planets too. You really believe that they're in that same period of time. The attention to detail is extraordinary. I feel that the final land battle with the AT Walkers was brilliant too, and really taking this home and really making this feel closer to the original trilogy in ways we could have never imagined. And it's brilliant the more you rewatch it. So I would have to say personally, it lacks the joyousness you would want in the Star Wars film that I think Solo gives you more, or The Force Awakens gives me more. But I think in terms of being darker and more grown up, more intense, I would say Rogue One is a very deep movie, and it's much higher on my list than it was when it released about 6 years ago. But I put it at 4 right now. And then the remainder, which brings me to my favorite trilogy, the originals, I would have to say third place for me personally. I'm almost tempted to always put this at the top, but I just feel as excellent a movie as it is, it kind of pales in comparison to how brilliant episodes 4 and 5 are. So I would have to put Return of the Jedi number 3, where I do feel like the final 15-20 minutes is some of the best material in the entire original trilogy saga, and that final battle gives me goosebumps every time between Vader and Luke. But I just feel like as an overall movie, I have to put it third just because A New Hope, the one that started it all, would have to be my number 2. And I just feel like writing and directing wise and just that whole less is more quality that Return of the Jedi still has, there was a spirit and a sort of magic to A New Hope and Empire that just can't be touched for me personally. A lot of these other films have come extremely close, including Rogue One in certain areas, or even Force Awakens a little bit, Revenge of the Sith, but none of them have ever thoroughly been able to take the place of any of the 3 originals, especially A New Hope for me and Empire. For me, the absolute pinnacle of all the 9 trilogy of trilogy films and the 9 saga film series, number 1 would always have to be The Empire Strikes Back, which is just totally in a different league for me on a personal level. And then I would have to say that pretty much makes it up for me. I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Recently, I'd say the TV series have really gone there for me, especially Mandalorian and Andor. I'm really looking forward to Ahsoka, which I think is going to be brilliant. The Obi-Wan series I really enjoyed, but it didn't really quite hit me the way I wanted it to. Certain episodes did, but I think the entire 6 episodes, certain ones kind of missed the mark for me. But overall, that was still a very good series. I don't think it's in the same league, though, as Andor and The Mandalorian. But of the series, I would definitely, for me personally, I'd put Mandalorian at the top just because that feels like true old school Star Wars for me. The adventure, the way it feels like an old school Western, which was very much rooted in a lot of George Lucas's influence on the original trilogy. This really feels very much like a Western, which I love about this series. And Andor does something very unique too, where it's not all about the space battles and duels, but it's more of an intellectual, adult thinking man Star Wars, where it's very mature, very grown up, and very well put together. That would just be my quick rundown of the series. The TV series, I definitely probably would put The Book of Boba towards the bottom. I enjoyed it, but I just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. I was assuming I was really gonna love this series, but it wasn't as great as what I had hoped it would be. So that of the TV series would be at the bottom for me, and then I would probably say Obi-Wan, and then I would say Andor, then The Mandalorian, and we'll have to wait to see when Ahsoka comes out, if that's able to readjust the TV series list too, because, you know, I assume that's going to be great too, of course, but we'll have to wait and see. But as far as the movies, I love them all. Love all 9 films. I love both of the standalone movies. As flawed as it is with the Clone Wars, still enjoy that too, even though that's at the bottom of my list. But out of all of them, number 1 is, and I can almost guarantee 100% always will be, for me personally, The Empire Strikes Back. So I just want to leave my list at that. Let me know in the comments below what you think, what's your personal ranking of these films, and why, what they mean to you personally. Again, this is just a personal list, which, just like my previous video of the top greatest actors of all time and actresses, that's very subjective too, just like my Star Wars ranking. So what I have these films ranked as right now, every so many months when I rewatch them, they constantly readjust all the time. The only two that never change in my ranking, I would say, are Empire and The New Hope. For me, those are completely on a different level. They were just different. They were old school. They were very, very important to the saga, and had A New Hope not done well, obviously we would have never even had more Star Wars even. So just that fact alone, and just the elegance of those two movies, are just on a completely different level for me. But anyway, that's just my ranking of these films. It's hard to really rank them. I enjoy them all, even the ones that may be a little bit weaker to me personally, but they're all very special to me. But I would have to put certain ones a lot lower than others. So I just want to hear in the comments below what you all think. What is your personal rankings, and why certain films mean more than others to you personally. And again, if you haven't already, I ask please again, like, comment, and subscribe. And we're going to continue to have more and more movie reviews, more and more movie recommendations, movie skits, more discussions of actors from the past and present. And we're going to do rankings of films and why they personally mean so much to me. And I just want to make this a very open movie channel that really feels very simple, using that whole less is more aspect. I always want to bring that to my channel where it feels just normal. Like I'm just, I feel like I'm an average guy who's like everyone, and I just always want to project that in my videos, and just always leave things less is more. Sometimes it turns out better that way. Well, anyway, I just wanted to share that with you briefly, and I want to know from everyone who runs across this video what you think of my list. And I know it's going to be very controversial, my ranking, but let me know what you personally think, what you would put higher than certain films I may have ranked higher, and ones I may have ranked lower that you would put higher, and why you feel that way. But I'd love to hear from everyone. Well, again, thank you for watching. I'll have more videos soon coming on the way. And again, like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time